Welcome to Echoes in the Gallery. I'm your host, Susan L. Sistrunk. I'm a lifelong artist, veteran educator of the arts, and proud to bring you my first podcast set in a series of volumes. Each episode will air weekly on Thursday evenings, available at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. Tonight, we begin with Volume 1, Beneath the Paint, Episode 1, The Con, where we will meet our heroes, or villains, depending on your point of view. Let us step into the gallery and begin. A frost of air flowed through the gallery as if December had rushed in during the first week of August. Faces, landscapes, captured in rich oil, gleamed from surfaces stretched, prepared, painted, and at one time, much loved by their creators. Each sound reverberated off the green marble floors, whispering secrets through a grand and sweeping hall, the walls built of dark, shining wood. As his steps echoed at midnight, the paintings and sculptures seemed to listen to his empty, hollow movements in a building which should have been full of warmth. They knew all his secrets, as they had been present for most, and would be there for more. Thoughts of where he had come from and what was next to happen flowed inside his mind. Winter had not arrived yet, and he was reminded of an autumn season which seemed long ago, when the world was much, much simpler. The plan would only work if everything went exactly according to what he had lined up, and it needed to happen soon. They were running out of time. The deadline was fast approaching, and the client was growing impatient. How could it have come this far? Why did they decide to do this? As Jonathan Brooks gazed at the Kandinsky on the wall of the modern wing, he pondered. Could it be possible to pull it off? Maybe, if he was lucky. After all, he had the materials, the right canvas size from the right time period, the right paint and the same style executed. Most importantly, Jonathan had a buyer who was offering above market value and was asking no questions. Now all he needed to do was steal the painting which belonged to a private collector and replace it with the one he forged. Early the next morning, warm autumn sunlight of California sky streamed through the sheer curtains of Gwen's bedroom. She winced and sat up, wondering why closing the blinds at night was such a struggle for her to remember. Gato, her tuxedo feline companion, had once again found a way to stay in at night and curl up at the end of the bed. Gazing at her phone through sleepy eyes, Gwen realized the time. As director of an art gallery in downtown San Francisco, arriving on time was mandatory. Gwen had been awake quite late, though, working, and Gato had the paint on his nose to prove it. He raised his eyes admonishingly toward Gwen. I know, buddy. Late night. Gato closed his eyes, curled up, and resumed his rest. Not a care in the world. Oh, to be a cat, Gwen thought. The brushstrokes had overtaken the night, enveloping space and atmosphere as a comforting blanket of anonymity. Paint flowed, colors sensually mixed together in a swirl of conflicting emotions, her very soul on fire with creation. How could one not be in love with their creation, even if it was not theirs to begin with? Walking toward the kitchen for coffee in a tiny apartment, Gwen stopped to stare at it. Almost perfect. Though the situation surrounding the creation of the canvas upset the aura, there was not much she would not do for Jonathan. Standing on the tile, looking out at the bay and back at the painting, she pondered. Where would this end? It was supposed to bring a new life for them, to pay off gallery debt, make them comfortable. But after 3 forgeries, when would it stop? The world was spinning out of control. Instead of getting out, Jonathan just kept sinking more work and money into that expensive and uptight space. And this one? The Kandinsky was risky as hell. So Gwen talked him into something worse. How large was her ego to even think they could possibly pull this off? Past events emerged in her mind as if a dark thundering horse of premonition were pounding into the present as she thought of the day they had first met. Oak leaves had swirled in an overcast sky and over the grass as Gwen walked down a path at Berkeley, Monet's biography in one hand and a cup of coffee in the other. The magic of Impressionism, the cadmium red and yellow leaves bringing forth distraction when suddenly her movements met a human wall. Startled, she glanced up and realized his brown eyes at once. Her art history professor, Jonathan Brooks. He smiled down at her from his 6'2" frame. Even for an art historian, I don't think Monet is so enthralling as to walk out into traffic. Gwen wrenched her eyes away from Jonathan's and realized she'd been careening toward the curb and was about to step off into the street. "Oh," Gwen gasped. "Thank you, Professor Brooks. Of course, we can't have you leaving us so soon. And our class together was in the spring. You can call me Jonathan now." Heat rose to Gwen's cheeks as she lifted her eyes to meet his gaze. At 21, she'd only ever had one boyfriend and was terribly shy. "Okay, Jonathan," she managed to whisper. "Thank you again." She turned to find her way back toward the path, her face still burning. "Have a drink with me," he said with confidence. It was a statement, not a question nor a command. A statement put forth in the manner there was no other acceptable option for future events. She nodded slightly and placed Monet's biography inside the satchel around her shoulder. They walked toward a small bistro, speaking on what most art lovers do, art. Gwen began to open up during the evening, for a drink had turned to dinner. She gushed about her love of art and painting. She was fairly obsessed with all aspects of the subject of art. The two discussed the masters, and what it would have been like to live and paint in the 17th century. Gwen was unaware he was a painter as well. It fascinated her because she had always viewed Jonathan from an academic aspect. As the evening progressed, she found herself gazing at the light sprinkling of salt in Jonathan's brown hair. He, in turn, was watching the curve of her face, and the way Gwen's black hair framed her eyes. At 11 p.m. they walked home, to his apartment not far from campus. It seemed another unspoken certainty. Jonathan did not ask her up. He simply placed his hand on the side of her face, tilted her chin, and gently kissed her. Then, with his hand placed on the small of her back, they walked up the stairs. Jonathan opened the door, guided her inside, and softly closed it behind them. Gwen was plunged back into the present with the chime of her cell phone. There was no time for this, not right now. That would be Jonathan calling to check on the progress of the painting. Using her old small flat for these projects was best. It kept her focused and prying eyes away. As the line connected, she immediately realized it was not Jonathan. "Have you found the painting yet?" Crisp silence on the line followed the inquiry. Breath caught in her throat, and hairs rose in a displeasing fashion on the nape of Gwen's neck, bringing chills down her spine. "We're working on it. There are several leads, and I cannot stress the importance of tracking down each one of them thoroughly." Fiction spilled out like a river. The painting needed more time to dry, at least a week. Even then it was dicey. If even one thing went wrong, they were in serious trouble. Much worse than going to prison for art forgery. "I have been patient," the voice on the line added. "This will add to my impressionist collection, and I am paying you a great deal of money to procure it for me." Words flowed over the phone in a thick accent with possible Eastern European origins. "Of course. We would not be happier to help you with this task. We are working very hard on it, and we're closing in on finding it. Surely the painting will surface in the next few days." "You have 10 days before I find someone else to find it for me. If that happens, I will need my deposits back from you, and I don't need to tell you what will happen if it goes that direction." "I understand," she said, and heard a click. The line was dead. Tears welled in Gwen's eyes. The money was gone. They could not possibly pay it back. Sitting in his car, Stefan stared across the street after hanging up the phone. The woman must think he was daft. He knew she didn't live in that apartment, yet was spending a lot of time working there. What was she working on? It couldn't be tracking down Silence in the Garden by Romanov-Sonova. The $40,000 finder's fee was just a drop of what he would be paying them upon receipt. It was time to have the woman tracked and protect his investment. The nervousness in Gwen's voice gave him a feeling he didn't like in the depth of his gut. "Yuri," he called to the driver after rolling down the partition. Yes, sir? Call Eric. Have him follow the woman. I want to know what she is doing. And I want to know what she is doing all day in that apartment she does not live in. The partition slid back into place as the sleek black Lincoln Continental rolled away. Gwen watched from the small gap in the kitchen blinds, with tears in her eyes. This concludes the first episode of Echoes in the Gallery. Please join me, your host, Susan L. Sistrunk, next week for Episode 2, The Patron, where we will delve into Gwen and Jonathan's dealings in the artistic underworld and meet their formidable benefactor and opponent, Stefan Ivanov. Until then, thank you for listening. Stay safe and love each other.